Can you be my mum just for today? The CEO's lonely daughter asked a stranger. Before we begin, drop a comment below with the city you're watching from. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this emotional story. Please, can you be my mum just for today? The words echoed through the department store as a 7-year-old girl stood crying, her small hands desperately clutching the sleeve of a woman she'd never met before. Tears streamed down the child's face as shoppers stopped in their tracks, their whispers filling the air. The woman, frozen in shock, looked around frantically for the girl's parents, her eyes wide with confusion and concern. Other customers pulled out their phones, some recording, others ready to call security. The little girl's voice cracked as she pleaded again, her grip tightening on the stranger's arm like it was her only lifeline in a drowning world. But how did we get here? What could possibly drive a child to beg a complete stranger to be her mother, even if just for one day? To understand that, we need to go back 3 hours earlier. Sarah Mitchell pushed her shopping cart through the aisles of Riverside Mall, her tired eyes scanning the shelves without really seeing them. At 34, she was a nurse who dedicated her life to caring for others, but lately, she'd been struggling to care for herself. There was a sadness she carried, hidden behind her warm smile, a weight that seemed to pull at her shoulders with every step. This was supposed to be her day off, a chance to distract herself from the thoughts that had been consuming her for months. She moved through the store mechanically, picking up items she didn't really need, anything to keep her hands busy and her mind occupied. As she turned down the cereal aisle, Sarah's eyes caught sight of a mother and daughter laughing together, the little girl pointing excitedly at a box with a cartoon character on it. Sarah's breath hitched. She quickly looked away, redirecting her cart in the opposite direction. This wasn't the first time today. Every mother-daughter pair she passed felt like a knife twisting in her chest. You see, just 3 months ago, Sarah had suffered a miscarriage. The baby she dreamed about, planned for, already loved with every fiber of her being, was gone. Since then, she'd been avoiding baby sections in stores, declining invitations to family gatherings, doing everything she could to escape the constant reminders of what she'd lost. And now, with Mother's Day approaching in just 2 days, the reminders were everywhere. The flower displays, the greeting card aisles, the special promotions, all of it felt like the universe was mocking her pain. Sarah had specifically chosen today to shop because she thought a Thursday afternoon would be quiet, that she could slip in and out without confronting the life she'd imagined but would never have. But as she passed another mother braiding her daughter's hair near the checkout line, Sarah felt the familiar sting of tears threatening to surface. She blinked them back, took a deep breath, and headed toward the exit. She just needed to get out of there, to get home where she could let herself fall apart in private. But fate, it seems, had other plans for Sarah Mitchell that day. If you're already hooked by this story and want to see more heartwarming tales like this, do yourself a favor and subscribe to Rich Tide's channel. Trust me, you won't regret it. Now, while Sarah was fighting her own battle with grief inside that mall, just 50 feet away, another soul was fighting a battle of her own. Lily Harrison sat perfectly still on a wooden bench outside Toy Galaxy, her small legs dangling above the floor, too short to reach the ground. At 7 years old, she wore a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's weekly groceries. Her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail secured with a silk ribbon. In her lap, she clutched a worn teddy bear, its fur matted from years of being her only constant companion. To anyone passing by, she looked like a child waiting patiently for her parents. But if you looked closer, if you really paid attention, you'd see the loneliness etched into her young face. Lily's eyes tracked every family that walked by. She watched a mother tie her son's shoelace. She watched another mother wipe ice cream off her daughter's chin, laughing as she did it. She watched a little girl around her age throw her arms around her mother's neck, receiving a kiss on the forehead in return. And with each observation, Lily hugged her teddy bear a little tighter, as if trying to squeeze comfort from its threadbare body. A security guard approached for the 3rd time in 20 minutes, his expression a mix of concern and protocol. "Still waiting for your dad, sweetheart?" he asked gently. Lily nodded, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "He's in a meeting," she explained, her voice small but practiced, as if she'd given this explanation 1,000 times before. The guard glanced at his watch, clearly uncomfortable with leaving a child alone for so long. But Lily quickly added, "He'll be here soon," he promised. The guard nodded reluctantly and walked away, but not before Lily saw the pity in his eyes. She hated that look. She saw it from teachers, from her dad's employees, from other kids' parents. That look that said, "Poor little rich girl." On the bench beside her, Lily's tablet buzzed with an incoming message. She picked it up, already knowing what it would say before she even read it. "Conference call running late. Stay put, Dad." No apology, no estimated time, no "I love you," just instructions. Lily typed back a simple "okay" and set the tablet down, her fingers lingering on the screen for a moment. She wondered if her dad was even the one typing these messages, or if it was Jessica, his assistant, who seemed to manage more of his life than he did. Lily looked down at her teddy bear, Mr. Buttons, named by a mother she couldn't remember. Her mom had died when Lily was 4, in a car accident that her dad still couldn't talk about without his voice breaking. Lily's memories of her mother were fragmented, more feelings than images. She remembered warmth, softness, the smell of vanilla and lavender. She remembered a voice singing lullabies, though she couldn't recall the melody anymore. She remembered feeling safe, completely and utterly safe, in a way she hadn't felt since. Her dad tried, she knew he did. Michael Harrison had built Harrison Tech from nothing, turning it into a multimillion-dollar company, all to provide for her, to give her the best of everything. The best schools, the best clothes, the best tutors, the best of everything except the one thing she desperately wanted. Time, presence, parent who was actually there. Tomorrow was Friday, just another day for most people. But for Lily, it loomed like a dark cloud. Mother's Day was this Sunday, and her school, Riverside Elementary, was hosting their annual Parent Appreciation Day tomorrow at 10 a.m. All the kids were supposed to bring their moms for a day of activities. Baking cookies, making crafts, taking silly photos in the photo booth. Last year, her dad had sent Rebecca, his sister, but Aunt Rebecca had spent the whole time on her phone, barely participating. The other kids had whispered, some had even laughed. Lily had smiled through it, pretending it didn't hurt, but that night she'd cried herself to sleep. This year, her dad had suggested sending Jessica, his assistant, but Lily had refused. She'd rather go alone than endure that humiliation again. At least if she went alone, she could say her mom was sick or traveling. Anything was better than the truth, that she didn't have a mom and her dad was too busy to fill that role, even for one day. What would you do if you were in Lily's position? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Lily sighed, watching a mother and daughter exit the toy store, the little girl clutching a new doll, her face glowing with excitement. The mother leaned down and kissed the top of her daughter's head, a gesture so simple yet so profound that Lily felt her chest tighten. She wanted that. She wanted someone to kiss her forehead, to hold her hand just because, to make her pancakes shaped like butterflies, to braid her hair, to know her favorite color without having to check with an assistant. She wanted someone to show up, not out of obligation or payment, but because they wanted to be there. As the afternoon sun streamed through the mall's skylights, casting long shadows across the tiled floor, Lily made a decision. She didn't know how and she didn't know who, but somehow, someway, she was going to find someone to be her mom tomorrow. Even if it was just pretend. Even if it was just for one day. Because one day of feeling loved and wanted was better than another day of feeling invisible. And in just a few minutes, her eyes would land on a woman with tired eyes and a warm smile. A woman carrying her own invisible wounds. A woman named Sarah Mitchell. Neither of them knew it yet, but their collision course had already been set. Two broken hearts, both searching for something they thought they'd lost forever, were about to find each other in the most unexpected way. Sarah was heading toward the mall exit, her grocery bags feeling heavier with each step, when something made her stop. Call it intuition, call it fate, call it whatever you want, but something pulled her attention to a small figure sitting alone on a bench outside the toy store. A little girl, no more than 7 years old, sat there clutching a teddy bear, her eyes following every family that passed by with a longing that was almost painful to witness. Sarah's nurse instincts kicked in immediately. A child alone in a mall, sitting for who knows how long. That wasn't right. She hesitated for a moment, her own pain still raw, still fresh, but her concern for this child overrode everything else. She approached slowly, not wanting to startle the girl, and when she got close enough, she knelt down to eye level. "Hey, sweetie, are you okay? Where are your parents?" The little girl looked up, and Sarah saw something flicker in those young eyes. Hope, guarded and cautious, as if the child had learned not to expect too much from the world. The girl's voice was quiet when she spoke. "My dad's working. My mom." She paused, her small hands gripping the teddy bear tighter. "I don't have a mom." Sarah felt her heart clench in her chest, a physical ache that took her breath away. Of all the things this child could have said, those 4 words hit Sarah like a truck. She lowered herself onto the bench beside the girl, her grocery bags forgotten at her feet. "I'm Sarah," she said softly. "What's your name?" "Lily. Lily Harrison." And just like that, 2 strangers sat side by side on a mall bench, both carrying wounds they didn't know how to heal. Sarah asked gentle questions, and slowly, like a flower opening to the sun, Lily began to talk. She told Sarah about her dad, Michael Harrison, the CEO of Harrison Tech, a man who'd built an empire but couldn't seem to find time to build memories with his daughter. Lily's voice held no resentment, just a resignation that broke Sarah's heart even more. "He tries," Lily explained, her fingers tracing patterns on Mr. Button's worn fur. "But he doesn't know how to do mom things, like braiding hair or making pancakes shaped like animals." The way she said it, so matter-of-fact, as if she'd already accepted this was just how her life would be, made Sarah want to wrap this child in her arms and never let go. Sarah leaned in a little closer, her voice warm and curious. "What's your favorite animal?" Lily's face brightened just a fraction. "Butterflies, because they're free to go anywhere." There was something profound in that answer, something that suggested this 7-year-old understood captivity in ways children shouldn't have to understand. She was a little girl trapped in a life of luxury but starved for the one thing money couldn't buy. As they talked, Sarah noticed something. Lily kept touching her stomach, just slightly, the universal sign of hunger. "Lily, honey, have you eaten today?" Sarah asked. Lily shook her head. "Dad said he'd take me to lunch after his meeting, but..." She trailed off, glancing at her tablet where another message notification had just appeared. Sarah made a decision. "How about I buy you some lunch? We can go to the food court together." The transformation in Lily's face was instant. Her eyes lit up with genuine excitement, a smile spreading across her features that looked like it didn't appear nearly often enough. "Really? Dad usually just sends his assistant to get me something." The fact that this simple offer meant so much to Lily told Sarah everything she needed to know about this child's life. Minutes later, they sat across from each other at the food court, trays of burgers and fries between them. Sarah, surprising herself, picked up a French fry and held it under her nose like a mustache. Lily giggled, a sound so pure and delightful that it seemed to fill the entire space. Sarah made another silly face, this time using 2 fries as fangs, and Lily's giggle turned into full laughter, her small body shaking with the kind of joy that children should experience every single day. For the first time in 3 months, Sarah felt something shift inside her. The crushing weight of her grief didn't disappear, but it lightened, just enough for her to breathe a little easier. Sitting here with this lonely little girl, making her laugh with ridiculous French fry faces, Sarah felt something she thought she'd lost forever. Purpose. A reason to smile that felt genuine instead of forced. As Lily munched on her burger, she looked at Sarah with those observant eyes that seemed too wise for her age. "Do you have kids?" she asked innocently, not knowing she was pressing on Sarah's deepest wound. Sarah's smile faltered. Her hand instinctively went to her stomach, a gesture she didn't even realize she was making. "No," she said quietly. "I don't." The silence that followed lasted only a heartbeat, but in that moment, Sarah felt the full weight of her loss crashing back down on her. Lily tilted her head, studying Sarah's face with a perception that was startling. Then, in a voice so small and hopeful it was barely above a whisper, she asked, Would you want to be someone's mom? Like, just for pretend?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning that neither of them fully understood yet. Sarah opened her mouth to respond, but Lily rushed on, as if she needed to get it all out before she lost her courage. "Tomorrow is Mother's Day at my school. Well, they call it Parent Appreciation Day. All the kids are supposed to bring their moms for activities. Baking, crafts, photo booth, stuff like that." Lily's voice grew quieter with each word. "Everyone will have their mom except me. Last year, Dad sent his secretary, Miss Jessica. She's nice, but..." Lily looked down at her hands. The kids laughed. "They said I had to rent a mom because mine didn't want me." Tears began to well up in Lily's eyes, threatening to spill over. "That's not true, though. My mom didn't leave me. She died when I was 4. I don't really remember her, except sometimes I smell vanilla and lavender and I feel like she's there. But she's not. She's never there." Sarah felt her own tears threatening to fall. Here was this beautiful, sweet, lonely child, asking for something so simple yet so profound. One day, just one day of feeling what it was like to have a mother's love, a mother's attention, a mother's presence. And Sarah, who had wanted nothing more than to give that love to a child of her own, was being offered the chance to be exactly what this little girl needed. "I just want to know what it feels like," Lily whispered, a single tear rolling down her cheek. "Just once. I want to know what it's like to have someone there who chose to be there, not because they're paid to or because they have to, but because they want to." Before Sarah could find her voice through the emotion clogging her throat, Lily's tablet buzzed again. Another message. Lily picked it up, read it, and her shoulders slumped even further. She typed out a response, her small fingers moving slowly across the screen. "Still waiting, Dad." The resignation in that message, the lack of anger or frustration, just acceptance that this was her normal, shattered something inside Sarah. Sarah reached across the table and gently took Lily's hand. Her voice was thick with emotion when she finally spoke. "What time is your event tomorrow?" Lily looked up, hope and disbelief warring in her expression, as if she couldn't quite believe this was actually happening. 10 a.m. at Riverside Elementary. "But you don't have to. I know I'm just a stranger and this is weird and you probably have your own life and I'll be there." Those 3 words stopped Lily mid-sentence. The little girl's eyes went wide, searching Sarah's face for any sign that she didn't mean it, that this was just another broken promise waiting to happen. But Sarah squeezed her hand and said it again, firmer this time, like a vow. "I'll be there, Lily. I promise." And in that moment, something miraculous happened. 2 broken hearts, 2 souls who thought they'd lost their chance at the love they desperately needed, found each other. A woman who'd lost the chance to be a mother and a child who'd lost the chance to have one, connected in a way that transcended logic or reason. Sometimes the universe takes away with one hand only to give back with the other. And sometimes, just sometimes, the things we think we've lost forever come back to us in the most unexpected ways. Lily's tears spilled over then, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of relief, of hope, of a prayer being answered that she'd been too afraid to even pray out loud. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you, Sarah." But their story was far from over, because at that very moment, across the mall, a man in an expensive suit was rushing out of a conference room, guilt etched across his face, desperately trying to make up for yet another broken promise to his daughter. Michael Harrison was about to discover that a stranger had spent the last hour with his child, and not everyone would see that as the blessing it truly was. Lily, I'm so sorry." The merger call went longer than. The voice cut through the food court like a knife, sharp with urgency and guilt. A man in an expensive tailored suit came rushing toward them, his leather shoes clicking rapidly against the tile floor. His tie was loosened, his hair slightly disheveled, and despite his polished appearance, he looked absolutely exhausted. This was Michael Harrison, 38 years old, CEO of a tech empire, and a father who was perpetually 5 minutes too late. But he stopped dead in his tracks when he saw his daughter sitting across from a stranger, a woman he'd never seen before. His expression shifted instantly from relief to confusion to protective alarm. "Who are you?" His voice carried an edge of suspicion as his eyes darted between Sarah and Lily. "Lily, is everything okay?" Lily jumped up from her seat, her face lighting up in a way that Michael hadn't seen in months. "Dad, this is Sarah. She's really nice and she's going to—" Sarah stood up quickly, her hands raised in a calming gesture. She understood immediately how this must look to him, a father arriving to find his young daughter with a complete stranger. "Mr. Harrison, I'm Sarah Mitchell. I'm a nurse. I noticed Lily sitting alone and just wanted to make sure she was okay. We've just been talking, and she mentioned tomorrow's event at her school." Michael's face transformed, the protective suspicion melting into something far worse. Guilt. Pure, crushing guilt that seemed to age him 10 years in an instant. His shoulders sagged as he looked at his daughter. Tomorrow, the Mother's Day thing. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that spoke of countless sleepless nights and impossible decisions. "Lily, sweetheart, I told you Aunt Rebecca could go with you. She said she'd." "Aunt Rebecca is busy." Lily's voice cracked, all the emotion she'd been holding back suddenly pouring out. "She's always busy. Everyone is always busy except for Sarah." The little girl's hands were clenched into fists at her sides, her whole body trembling with frustration and hurt. "Sarah actually listened to me, Dad. She didn't check her phone once. She made me laugh. She made me feel like I mattered, not like I was just another appointment on someone's calendar." The words hit Michael like physical blows. You could see it in his face, the way each accusation landed, the way the truth of his daughter's loneliness finally broke through all his justifications and excuses. He opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. What could he say? She was right. She was absolutely right. Sarah watched this exchange, her heart breaking for both of them. The tension in the air was thick, but as she observed Michael more closely, she realized something important. This wasn't a negligent father. This wasn't a man who didn't care. This was a man barely keeping his head above water, drowning in responsibilities he'd never asked for but had shouldered anyway. Michael's voice was barely above a whisper when he finally spoke, and he wasn't looking at Sarah anymore. He was looking at Lily, really looking at her, perhaps for the first time in a long time. "Can we sit down? Please." It wasn't a command. It was a request, humble and broken. They sat, the three of them now forming an unlikely triangle at that food court table. Michael took a deep breath, and when he began to speak, Sarah could hear 3 years of buried pain finally surfacing. "Lily's mother, my wife Emily, died in a car accident 3 years ago. A drunk driver ran a red light on a Tuesday afternoon. She was coming home from picking up Lily from preschool. They said Emily died instantly, that she didn't suffer, but Lily," his voice caught, "Lily was in the back seat. She saw everything." Sarah's hand went to her mouth, tears already forming in her eyes. Lily sat very still, staring at the table, her small hand reaching out to hold her father's. This was clearly a story she'd heard before, but it never got easier. Michael continued, his words coming faster now, as if he'd held them in for so long that they were finally breaking free. "I was just a mid-level software developer back then. We had enough to get by, but nothing more. After Emily died, I looked at Lily, and I thought, how am I going to do this? How am I going to be both parents? How am I going to give her the life Emily would have wanted for her?" He looked up at Sarah then, his eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. "So I started my own company. I worked 18-hour days, 7 days a week. I built Harrison Tech from nothing, from a one-room apartment office to what it is now. And I told myself it was all for her, all for Lily. I thought if I could just build something successful, I could give her everything. The best schools, the best opportunities, security, stability, everything Emily and I never had." Michael's hand tightened around Lily's. "But in doing that, I missed things. Soccer games where she scored her first goal. Piano recitals where she played her first solo. Bedtimes where she needed someone to check for monsters under the bed. I missed moments I can never get back, and I kept telling myself it would be worth it, that one day she'd understand why I had to work so much. His voice finally broke, tears streaming down his face now. But the one thing she wants, the one thing she needs, I can't give her. I can't give her a mother. I can't give her back Emily. And every day I see her looking at other kids with their moms, and I see the loneliness in her eyes, and I feel like I'm failing her all over again. The food court seemed to fade away. Other diners, the clatter of trays, the buzz of conversation, all of it disappeared. There were only 3 people in that moment, 3 broken hearts laid bare and vulnerable. Sarah reached across the table, placing her hand gently on Michael's arm. When she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion but steady with conviction. "You're not failing her, Michael. You're drowning, and you've been drowning alone for 3 years, trying to be 2 parents when you're only 1 person. That's not failure. That's you doing the impossible with no help and no break and no one to catch you when you fall." She looked at Lily, then back at Michael. "I see you. I see a man who loves his daughter so much he's literally worked himself to exhaustion trying to provide for her. I see a man carrying grief he's never been allowed to process because he had to be strong for his child. You're not a bad father, Michael. You're a human being who's been trying to do the impossible." Michael stared at Sarah as if she'd just spoken a language he'd forgotten existed. The language of understanding, of compassion, of someone actually seeing him instead of just seeing the successful CEO or the widowed father or any of the other labels he'd been wearing like armor for 3 years. Sarah saw in Michael's eyes the same thing she felt in her own heart. Loneliness. Not the loneliness of being alone, but the loneliness of being surrounded by people and still feeling utterly isolated. The loneliness of grief that nobody else understands. The loneliness of carrying burdens that are slowly crushing you while everyone else sees only your strength, never your struggle. Michael wiped his eyes, trying to compose himself. "Sarah, you don't owe us anything. You've already been kind to my daughter, kinder than you had any reason to be. I can't ask you to." "You're not asking," Sarah interrupted gently. She looked at Lily's hopeful face, those eyes that held so much love and so much longing, and then back at Michael. "I'm offering. I lost something precious recently, a chance to be a mother. I lost a baby 3 months ago, and I've been walking around feeling like there's this hole inside me that nothing can fill." Her voice wavered, but she pushed on. "Maybe tomorrow we both get to heal a little. Maybe I get to give the love I've been storing up with nowhere to put it. And maybe Lily gets to feel, even if just for one day, what it's like to have someone show up for her who wants to be there." Michael's eyes widened with understanding, with shared grief, with the recognition of someone who understood loss in the way only those who've experienced it can understand. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Are you absolutely sure?" Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face now. "I'm sure." The sound that came from Lily was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. She launched herself at Sarah, throwing her small arms around her neck and holding on as if Sarah might disappear if she let go. "Thank you. Thank you. This is the best day ever." Her words tumbled out between happy tears. "I promise I'll be good. I promise I'll do whatever you say. I promise." "Lily," Sarah said softly, pulling back to look at the little girl's face. "You don't have to promise anything. You don't have to earn this. You're already enough, exactly as you are." They exchanged phone numbers, made plans to meet at the school at 9:45 the next morning. Michael insisted on getting Sarah's full name, her contact information, offered to pay her for her time until Sarah firmly but kindly told him that this wasn't a transaction. This was something else entirely, something that couldn't be bought or paid for. As they prepared to part ways, Lily refused to let go of Sarah's hand until the very last moment. Michael walked Sarah toward the parking lot, Lily skipping ahead of them, already planning what activities they'd do together. When they reached Sarah's car, Michael turned to her, and the gratitude in his eyes was almost overwhelming. "Sarah," he called out as she opened her car door. She turned back to look at him. "Thank you, really. I don't know what brought you into that mall today, what twist of fate put you on that bench at that exact moment, but thank you for seeing my daughter. Thank you for seeing me." Sarah smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes for the first time in months. Sometimes the people we need find us exactly when we need them most. I'll see you both tomorrow. As Sarah drove away, she glanced in her rearview mirror to see Michael kneeling down, wrapping Lily in a hug, the kind of hug that said he was really there, really present, for the first time in a long time. And Sarah felt something she hadn't felt since the day she lost her baby. Hope. Not the desperate, grasping hope that things would go back to how they were, but the quiet, steady hope that maybe, just maybe, something new and beautiful could grow from the ashes of what was lost. Tomorrow would be Mother's Day at Riverside Elementary, and 3 people who'd been walking through life alone were about to discover that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about choice. Sometimes it's about showing up. And sometimes it's about a 7-year-old girl brave enough to ask a stranger to be her mom, just for one day. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she pulled into the parking lot of Riverside Elementary at 9:45 the next morning. She'd barely slept the night before, alternating between excitement and terror. What if she wasn't good enough? What if she said the wrong thing? What if she somehow made things worse for this little girl who'd already been through so much? But as she turned off her engine and took a deep breath, she remembered Lily's face yesterday, the hope in those eyes, and she knew she couldn't let her down. She wouldn't let her down. The moment Sarah stepped out of her car, she saw her. Lily stood by the school entrance wearing a bright yellow dress with butterflies embroidered along the hem, her hair pulled back in a ponytail tied with a yellow ribbon. The little girl was bouncing on her toes, scanning every car that pulled up, and when her eyes landed on Sarah, her entire face transformed. "You came. You really came." Lily's voice rang out across the parking lot as she took off running, her dress flowing behind her like wings. She crashed into Sarah with the full force of her small body, wrapping her arms around Sarah's waist and holding on tight. Sarah felt her eyes burning with tears as she hugged this child back. This beautiful, brave little girl who'd asked a stranger for something most people take for granted. "Of course I came," Sarah whispered, kneeling down to Lily's level. "I made you a promise, didn't I? Most people break their promises to me," Lily said quietly, her honesty cutting straight through Sarah's heart. "But I knew you wouldn't. I just knew." Behind Lily, standing near the school entrance, Sarah spotted Michael. He was dressed more casually than yesterday, jeans and a button-down shirt, his hands in his pockets as he watched his daughter with an expression that was part joy, part pain. When he noticed Sarah looking, he walked over, a sheepish smile on his face. "I took the day off," he said, as if he still couldn't quite believe it himself. "First time in 2 years. Figured if you were brave enough to show up for my daughter, I should be brave enough to show up too." Sarah smiled at him, understanding what that decision must have cost him. How many meetings he'd rescheduled, how many calls he'd delegated, how much trust he was placing in his team to handle things without him. "That means everything, Michael. To both of us." They walked into the school together, Lily holding Sarah's hand and practically vibrating with excitement. The gymnasium had been transformed into a wonderland of pastel decorations. Pink and purple streamers hung from the ceiling, balloons clustered in every corner, and hand-painted banners proclaimed, "We love our moms," in glittery letters. Tables were set up around the room, each station offering a different activity. The cookie decorating table, the craft corner, the photo booth with silly props, the relay race area with its colorful cones and ribbons. Everywhere Sarah looked, she saw mothers and children, pairs and groups laughing together, working side by side. A woman helping her daughter measure flour, another mother wiping frosting off her son's nose, a mom chasing her giggling child around the relay cones. It was beautiful and overwhelming and exactly what Sarah had dreamed of doing with her own child. But she wasn't here for the child she'd lost. She was here for the child holding her hand right now, looking up at her with eyes full of wonder and barely contained joy. "What do you want to do first?" Sarah asked, and Lily's response was immediate. "Cookies. Can we make cookies?" They made their way to the baking station where aprons were distributed and ingredients laid out. Sarah tied an apron around Lily, then around herself, and together they began measuring, mixing, laughing when flour puffed up in a cloud, giggling when chocolate chips kept disappearing into their mouths instead of the bowl. Lily's laughter filled the room, bright and uninhibited, the kind of laughter that only children can produce when they're truly, genuinely happy. "You're really good at this," Lily said, watching Sarah expertly fold the dough. "Did your mom teach you?" Sarah paused for just a moment, then smiled. "She did. When I was about your age, actually. We used to bake cookies every Sunday afternoon." It was a memory Sarah hadn't let herself touch in years, but somehow, here with Lily, it didn't hurt to remember. It felt like honoring something precious. As their cookies baked, the teacher announced it was photo booth time. Sarah felt herself hesitate. Photos meant evidence, permanent reminders of this day that might make it harder to let go when it was over. But Lily grabbed her hand, tugging her toward the booth with its backdrop of flowers and ridiculous props scattered on a table. "Come on, Sarah. We have to take pictures." Lily was already grabbing props. A pair of bunny ears for herself, a glittery crown for Sarah. "You have to wear the crown because you're like a princess who saved me." How could Sarah say no to that? They climbed into the booth together, and the camera flashed as they made silly faces. Bunny ears and crossed eyes, princess crowns and stuck-out tongues, superhero poses with fists raised high. With each flash, Sarah felt the walls around her heart crumbling a little more. She wasn't protecting herself anymore. She was all in, completely present, and it was terrifying and wonderful all at once. In a quiet moment between poses, as they waited for the camera to reset, Lily leaned her head against Sarah's shoulder and whispered, "I wish this was real." Sarah's breath caught. She wrapped her arm around Lily, pulling her close, and whispered back, "It is real, sweetie. Today it's very real. What we're feeling right now, this connection, this love, it's as real as anything in this world." Lily looked up at her, and Sarah saw tears glistening in the little girl's eyes, happy tears that matched the ones sliding down Sarah's own cheeks. They hugged right there in the photo booth, and the camera captured it. That moment of pure, unfiltered love between a woman and a child who'd found each other against all odds. The morning flew by in a blur of activities. They won second place in the relay race, both of them laughing so hard they could barely run. They painted flower pots at the craft station, Lily insisting on painting butterflies on hers. They ate the cookies they'd baked, still warm and gooey, and agreed they were the best cookies either of them had ever tasted. But then came the final activity, and everything changed. The teacher, Mrs. Patterson, stood at the front of the gym and called for everyone's attention. "All right, everyone. For our last activity, we're going to make cards for our moms. We have paper, markers, stickers, everything you need to tell your mom what she means to you. The theme is, what I love about my mom." Sarah felt her stomach drop. This was it, the moment that would make it clear that she wasn't Lily's real mother. That this was all just pretend, just one day of playing house before reality came crashing back in. She looked at Lily, ready to suggest they sit this one out. But Lily was already walking toward the craft table with determination in her step. Lily sat down, selected a piece of pink construction paper, and stared at it for a long moment. Sarah sat beside her, her heart aching, wondering what was going through this 7-year-old's mind. Around them, other children were already drawing hearts and flowers, writing "I love you, mommy" in crayon, creating masterpieces of childhood affection. But Lily just stared at her blank paper, then looked at Sarah, then back at the paper. Finally, she picked up a purple marker and began to write. Her tongue poked out slightly in concentration, her small hand gripping the marker tightly as she carefully formed each letter. Sarah watched, her chest tight with emotion, not knowing what to expect. When Lily finished, she looked at the card for a long moment, then folded it in half. She turned to Sarah, and with trembling hands, she held it out. "This is for you," she whispered. "Can you read it? But just you, not out loud." Sarah took the card, her hands shaking as much as Lily's. She opened it slowly, and what she saw written there in a child's uneven handwriting destroyed her. In the best possible way, it absolutely destroyed her. "Thank you for showing me what a mom's hug feels like. Love, Lily." The sob that escaped Sarah's throat was involuntary. Tears poured down her face as she pulled Lily into her arms, holding this precious child against her chest. Feeling Lily's small arms wrap around her neck and hold on tight, Sarah couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, could only hold on and cry as months of grief and loss and longing poured out of her. Around them, the room had grown quiet. Other mothers were noticing, their own eyes filling with tears as they witnessed something they couldn't fully understand but could feel in their souls. Some of them had heard whispers about the woman who wasn't really Lily's mother, about the arrangement that had brought them together. But seeing them now, seeing the raw, genuine love flowing between them, those labels didn't matter anymore. Mrs. Patterson approached, concern etched on her face. But before she could say anything, Michael was there. He'd been watching from the sidelines all morning, trying to stay out of the way, trying not to intrude on these precious moments between his daughter and this remarkable woman who'd appeared in their lives like an answer to prayers he'd been too afraid to pray. Michael spoke quietly to Mrs. Patterson, explaining in hushed tones about his wife's death, about Lily's loneliness, about Sarah's kindness. The teacher's expression shifted from concern to understanding to something that looked a lot like awe. She nodded, wiped at her own eyes, and quietly asked the other parents to give Sarah and Lily some space. The gymnasium went almost completely silent, dozens of eyes watching as Sarah and Lily held each other. This wasn't just about a lonely child and a grieving woman anymore. This was about love in its purest form, about two people who needed each other finding each other, about healing and hope and the extraordinary courage it takes to open your heart when it's already been broken. Finally, Sarah pulled back slightly, cupping Lily's face in her hands. "You are so loved, Lily Harrison, so incredibly loved. Not just by me, not just today, but by your dad who's trying his best, by your teachers, by everyone who knows you. You are worthy of love, not because of what you do or how you act, but because of who you are." Lily nodded, tears streaming down her face, and whispered, "Can I keep calling you Sarah, Mom? Even after today?" Before Sarah could answer, she heard a sound behind her. Michael was standing there, and he was crying too, not bothering to hide it, not caring who saw. He'd watched his daughter smile more in the last day than she had in 3 years. He'd watched a stranger love his child with a fierceness and gentleness that took his breath away. And he'd realized something that shook him to his core. As the event began to wind down, parents and children gathering their crafts and saying their goodbyes, Michael approached Sarah. His voice was rough with emotion when he spoke. "I've been watching you two all day. Lily hasn't smiled like that since..." He couldn't finish the sentence. "Since Emily. Since before the accident. Since before his whole world fell apart." Sarah stood, wiping her own tears away. "She's an amazing kid, Michael. You've done an incredible job raising her." Michael shook his head, fresh tears spilling over. "Have I, though? I've been so focused on providing, on building the company, on making sure she had financial security. But I forgot about presence. I forgot that she needed me to be there, not just to pay for things." His voice broke. "I forgot how to be a dad because I was so busy trying to be everything else." Before Sarah could respond, Lily came running over, a balloon in one hand and a cookie in the other, her face flushed with happiness. "Dad, did you see? Sarah and I won the relay race. Well, we got second place, but that's basically winning. And look at my cookie. I decorated it like a butterfly." Michael dropped to his knees, pulling his daughter into a hug that was different from all the hurried, distracted hugs he'd given her over the past 3 years. This was a hug that said, "I see you. I'm here. I'm really here. I saw, sweetheart. I saw everything. And I'm so proud of you. Not just for the race or the cookie, but for being brave enough to ask for what you needed." Lily hugged him back, then reached out for Sarah, pulling her into the embrace too. And there they stood, the three of them locked together, a family that didn't exist 24 hours ago but felt as real and solid as anything in this world. Michael looked at Sarah over Lily's head, and in his eyes, Sarah saw gratitude, but also something else. Something that looked like the beginning of something neither of them had expected but both of them desperately needed. The story wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. 3 months later, and everything had changed. Yet somehow, it all felt like it had always been meant to be this way. Sarah's voice, warm and reflective, carried over a series of moments that told a story words alone never could. I went to that mall looking for groceries. I found a family. A Saturday morning at Riverside Park. Sarah and Lily sat by the pond, tossing pieces of bread to eager ducks that paddled closer with each offering. Lily's laughter echoed across the water as one particularly bold duck waddled right up to her feet. Sarah showed her how to be gentle, how to make the smaller ducks feel safe enough to come close too. It was a simple moment, the kind that doesn't make headlines or appear on highlight reels, but it was everything. These were the moments Emily used to create, the moments Lily had been starving for, the moments that stitch a childhood together into something beautiful and whole. Sunday breakfast at Maggie's Diner became a sacred ritual. Michael, Sarah, and Lily crammed into a corner booth, sticky syrup and butter-soaked pancakes covering the table. Michael had learned to silence his phone during these meals, to resist the urge to check his emails, to simply be present. He'd even started a tradition of letting Lily order something ridiculous, the chocolate chip pancakes with whipped cream and gummy bears, because Emily used to let her do that too, and remembering didn't have to hurt anymore. Sarah sat across from them, her coffee growing cold as she listened to Lily's animated stories about school, about her friends, about the caterpillar she'd found at recess. And Michael watched Sarah with something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Something that looked like hope, like possibility, like maybe loving again wasn't a betrayal of what he'd lost but a celebration of what he'd found. Lily's soccer games became family events. Michael stood on the sidelines, no longer checking his watch or taking calls, but actually watching his daughter play, actually cheering when she kicked the ball, actually celebrating when her team scored, actually being there in body and spirit. And beside him, Sarah held a hand-painted sign that read, "Go Lily, number 7, in bright purple letters decorated with butterflies. When Lily scored her first goal of the season, she immediately looked to the sidelines, and her face lit up like the sun when she saw both of them there, jumping and cheering and celebrating her moment. After the game, she ran straight into their arms, both of them, and in that sweaty, breathless hug, Lily felt something she'd almost forgotten. She felt complete. Quiet evenings at Michael's house, the one he'd bought after Emily died because he couldn't bear to stay in the house where they'd built their life together. Sarah sat on Lily's bed, her fingers working through the little girl's hair, creating the French braid that Lily had asked for every single day since that first Mother's Day event. Michael stood in the doorway, just watching, a soft smile on his face. He tried to learn how to braid, had watched YouTube videos and practiced on rope, but his fingers were too clumsy, too uncertain. But Sarah's hands moved with confidence and love, and as she tied off the braid with a butterfly hair tie, Lily caught her father's eye in the mirror and smiled. "Dad's happy now," she'd whispered to Sarah one night. "I can tell because he smiles with his eyes again." Movie nights where no one made it to the end of the film. The three of them piled on the couch, Lily sandwiched between Sarah and Michael, a bowl of popcorn balanced precariously on someone's lap. By the time the credits rolled, they'd all fallen asleep, Lily's head on Sarah's shoulder, Michael's arms stretched behind them both, his hand resting gently on Sarah's arm. The first time it happened, Sarah had woken up disoriented, momentarily panicked that she'd overstepped, but Michael had simply smiled sleepily and said, "Stay, please stay." And she had. She'd stayed that night and so many nights after, not just physically but emotionally, weaving herself into the fabric of their lives as naturally as breathing. "I went to that mall looking for groceries." Sarah's voice continued over these images of a life rebuilt. "I found a family. Not the family I'd planned for, not the family I'd imagined, but the family I needed. The family that needed me." If you believe in the power of unexpected connections and the families we choose, subscribe to Rich Tide's channel. Because every story here reminds us that love finds a way, even when we've stopped looking for it. And now, on a warm afternoon in late summer, we return to Riverside Park, the same park where Sarah and Lily had fed ducks just months ago. But today was different. Today felt like an ending and a beginning all wrapped into one perfect moment. Lily ran ahead on the path, her yellow dress, the the same one from that first Mother's Day event, flowing behind her. She'd insisted on wearing it today, even though it was getting a bit short on her now, because it was her lucky dress, the dress she'd been wearing when her whole world changed. Sarah and Michael walked behind her, side by side, their hands occasionally brushing against each other in a way that was becoming less accidental and more intentional with each passing day. "Look!" Lily's voice rang out, full of wonder. A butterfly, orange and black with delicate wings, had landed on a wildflower just off the path. Lily approached slowly, carefully, the way Sarah had taught her to move around fragile things. With gentle hands and patient movements, she cupped her palms around the butterfly, creating a safe space rather than a cage. She turned back to Sarah and Michael, her face glowing with achievement. "I caught one. I actually caught one." Sarah and Michael hurried over, and Lily slowly opened her hands just enough for them to peek inside. The butterfly sat calmly on her palm, its wings opening and closing slowly, trustingly. "It's beautiful," Sarah whispered, her eyes shining with tears that seemed to come more easily these days. But they were good tears, healing tears. Lily looked at the butterfly, then at the open sky above them. "Look, I caught one. But I'm going to let it go because butterflies need to be free." Her words carried a wisdom beyond her 7 years, an understanding that love doesn't mean possession, that sometimes the greatest gift we can give is freedom. She raised her hands high and opened them fully, expecting the butterfly to immediately take flight. But instead, it walked delicately across her palm, then stepped onto Sarah's outstretched hand. For a long moment, it simply sat there, its wings catching the late afternoon sunlight, creating shadows that danced across Sarah's skin. Sarah held perfectly still, barely breathing, as if this tiny creature was delivering a message from the universe itself. Then, with a gentle flutter, the butterfly lifted into the air, circling once around the three of them before flying away toward the trees. Lily watched it go, then reached out to take both Sarah's and Michael's hands. She stood between them, looking up at the sky where the butterfly had disappeared, and said something that would change everything. "I don't need pretend anymore." Sarah and Michael looked at each other over Lily's head, both understanding the weight of what she was saying, both feeling their hearts expanding with a mixture of joy and fear and love, so profound it was almost painful. Lily turned to look up at Sarah, her eyes serious now, full of a question she'd been holding inside for weeks. "Can I just call you Sarah Mom? Not like pretend mom or sometimes mom, but just Sarah Mom? Because that's what you are. You're Sarah and you're my mom, and I don't want to have to explain it anymore or make it complicated. I just want to call you what you are." The tears that had been threatening to fall finally broke free, streaming down Sarah's face as she knelt down to Lily's level. Her voice shook with emotion when she spoke. "I would be honored, sweetheart, so deeply honored." She pulled Lily into a hug, holding this child who'd chosen her, this little girl who'd been brave enough to ask a stranger for love and wise enough to recognize it when it was given. Michael's own eyes were wet as he knelt down beside them, wrapping his arms around both of his girls. Yes, his girls. Somewhere over these past 3 months, that's what they'd become. Not a broken family trying to patch itself together with a temporary solution, but a real family, messy and imperfect and absolutely right. He looked at Sarah, really looked at her, and saw not just the woman who'd saved his daughter, but the woman who'd reminded him how to live instead of just survive. "Sarah," Michael's voice was soft but steady. "I know this started as one day, as a favor to a lonely little girl and her desperate father, but somewhere along the way it became real. You became real to us. This became real." He paused, searching for the right words. "I'm not asking you to replace Emily. No one could ever do that, and I wouldn't want them to try. But I am asking if maybe, possibly, you might want to build something new with us. Not pretend, not temporary, but real and permanent and forever." Sarah couldn't speak through her tears, so she simply nodded, pulling both of them closer. The three of them stayed there, kneeling on the park path, holding each other as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and orange. Finally, they stood, and Michael put his arm around Sarah's shoulders while Lily grabbed both their hands. They began walking down the path together, Lily skipping between them, occasionally swinging forward as they lifted her off her feet, her delighted squeals filling the air. Other park visitors smiled as they passed, seeing what looked like a perfect family enjoying a perfect evening, having no idea of the pain and loss and courage it had taken to create this moment. As they reached the end of the path, the setting sun behind them created three silhouettes, perfectly connected, moving as one unit. A father who'd learned that providing wasn't the same as being present. A daughter who'd been brave enough to ask for what she needed. And a woman who'd walked into a mall looking for groceries and walked out having found her purpose, her family, her home. The butterfly they'd released was long gone now, free to fly wherever it wanted, just as Lily had said it should be. But it had left something behind. A reminder that transformation is possible, that beauty can emerge from pain, that sometimes we have to let go of what we thought our lives would be in order to embrace what they're meant to become. Words appeared, not spoken but felt in every heart watching. Sometimes the family we need finds us in the most unexpected places. And in a mall in Riverside, on a Thursday afternoon that seemed ordinary but was actually extraordinary, three lives had collided in a way that changed everything. A lonely child, a grieving woman, and an overwhelmed father had found each other and, in doing so, had found themselves. This wasn't the story Sarah thought she'd be living when she woke up that morning 3 months ago. This wasn't the family she'd planned for or imagined. But as she walked between Michael and Lily, their laughter mixing with the evening breeze, Sarah realized something profound. Sometimes the best stories are the ones we never saw coming. Sometimes the greatest blessings arrive wrapped in the most unexpected packages. And sometimes, just sometimes, when we're brave enough to open our broken hearts to strangers, we discover they're not strangers at all. They're family. They've always been family. They were just waiting to find each other. What would you do if a child asked you to be their parent for just one day? How would you respond? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because every one of us has the power to change a life, sometimes in the most unexpected ways. How would you rate this story from 0 to 10? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more heart-touching stories coming your way soon.